The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It drummed endlessly against the windows of Café de Luna, a small corner coffee shop that smelled of roasted beans, caramel syrup, and weary dreams. The morning crowd murmured beneath the low hum of jazz music, their voices blending with the soft hiss of milk steaming from the espresso machine. Behind the counter, Emma moved quietly, a ghost in a stained apron. Her eyes were heavy, rimmed with sleeplessness. Every motion she made seemed calculated, deliberate, as if the slightest mistake could shatter her already fragile world. For weeks, Emma had been working double shifts. Her mother's hospital bills piled up like storm clouds, and each paycheck barely kept the lights on. But still, she smiled. That small, trembling smile of someone holding their life together with shaking hands. As she weaved through the tables, her shoes squeaked against the wet floor. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, the cafe's warmth wrapped around her like a fragile comfort. Until he walked in. The glass door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air and the scent of rain-soaked pavement. Every head in the cafe turned instinctively. A tall man stepped through. Blake Turner, the kind of man whose presence silenced rooms. His tailored charcoal suit clung perfectly to his broad frame, his hair slicked back with precision, his jaw sharp as stone. He was the embodiment of success, but his expression was pure frost. The manager at the counter straightened immediately, whispering under his breath, "That's Mr. Turner, the investment firm guy. Don't mess this up." Emma felt her stomach tighten. She knew the name. Blake Turner was a regular in the corporate building nearby, known for his ruthless efficiency, his cold remarks, his temper when things weren't perfect. She swallowed hard and forced herself forward, clutching her notepad like a lifeline. Good morning, sir. What can I get you today?" she asked softly, his eyes lifted, cold and assessing. "Just a black coffee. No sugar, that was it. No smile, no small talk. Just the order, sharp as a command." Emma nodded and hurried back to the counter. Her hands trembled as she prepared the coffee, the heat from the cup stinging her skin. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. All she needed to do was walk carefully, place it on the table, smile, walk away. Simple. But her body didn't listen. As she approached his table, the cafe's door swung open again behind her, a customer entering, the wind rushing in, and for one tiny second, the floor beneath her seemed to shift. Her shoe slipped against the damp tile. The cup tipped. Time slowed, a stream of dark, steaming liquid cascaded down Blake Turner's crisp white shirt and the lapel of his suit jacket. The sound was deafening, not the spill, but the silence that followed. The cafe froze. Even the jazz track playing in the background seemed to hold its breath. Emma's heart stopped. The color drained from her face as she stumbled backward, gasping. Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she stammered, grabbing napkins from the counter. "Please, I didn't mean—" Blake didn't move. His chair scraped back slowly, the leather creaking as he rose to his full height. His gaze burned into her, not wild, not loud, but calm in the most terrifying way possible. A man of control, and she had just shattered that control. The manager was already hurrying over, his voice trembling. "Mr. Turner, I deeply apologize for this. Emma, what on earth were you—" But Emma couldn't hear him. Her mind was a blur of panic. She saw her mother's face in that hospital bed, saw her paycheck slipping away, saw herself being fired before the day ended. She wanted to disappear. The coffee dripped from his sleeve to the floor in slow, rhythmic drops. Blake glanced down at the mess, then back up at her, his eyes sharp, unflinching. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence alone was a weapon. Finally, his lips parted, his tone low and cutting. "Do you have any idea," he said, each word precise as a knife, "what you've just done?" A shiver ran through the room. No one moved. A mother holding a toddler near the counter looked away. A man at the corner table lowered his phone. Even the barista froze mid-pour, the milk hissing into nothing. The only sound was the rain outside, pounding harder now as if echoing Emma's racing heartbeat. Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, sir, it was an accident." He took a slow step closer, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. Emma instinctively stepped back. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was it, the moment everything fell apart. But Blake's expression remained unreadable. The faintest muscle twitched in his jaw, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes. Something not quite anger, but pain. Then just as quickly, it was gone. The manager fumbled for words. "Sir, please let me comp your order. We'll pay for the dry cleaning or—" Blake raised a hand. Silence again. His gaze never left Emma. "Don't bother," he said quietly. "This isn't about the coffee." Confusion rippled through the crowd. What did he mean by that? Emma stood frozen, her breath shallow. The world around her felt distant, muffled, as if submerged under water. All she could hear was the faint hum of the fridge, the distant thunder, and the echo of his words repeating in her mind. Blake took a deep breath, straightened his jacket, and said one more thing, so softly that only those closest could hear. "Do you know what happens?" he murmured. "When a moment like this changes everything." And before anyone could react, he turned, his expression blank, and sat back down. The cafe stayed silent. No one dared speak. Emma's hands were still trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't understand what he meant. She only knew that something about that look, that quiet intensity, carried a story of its own, a story that wasn't over yet. The scene lingers on Emma's tear-streaked face as the camera slowly pans out. The cafe still frozen, the rain still falling, and then fade to black. The cafe was silent, the kind of silence that buzzes louder than any noise. The air felt thick, every heartbeat amplified, every breath held. Emma stood frozen, eyes wide and trembling, coffee dripping from the table onto the polished floor. Across from her, Blake Turner didn't speak. His expression was unreadable, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on her as if he was staring through her rather than at her. For a long, unbearable moment, time seemed to stop. The customers watched. The barista stopped mid-pour, and even the rain outside softened, as though nature itself waited for his reaction. Emma's chest tightened. Her palms were slick with sweat. This was it. She could already hear her manager's voice firing her, see her mother's disappointed eyes when she told her she lost the job they both depended on. Then, Blake exhaled, slowly, deeply. The sound of it was unexpected, heavy, weary, and in that breath the storm in his eyes began to fade. He reached up, loosened his tie, and removed his jacket, his movements deliberate and calm. But as the sleeve of his crisp white shirt rolled back, the cafe gasped collectively. A jagged scar ran down his forearm, pale and unmistakable. It looked old, healed, but carried a story no one dared to ask about. Emma's voice quivered. "Sir, I'll get something to clean it up, please." But Blake shook his head gently. His voice came out quiet, almost fragile. "You remind me of someone." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. The manager froze halfway across the room. The customers exchanged confused glances. Emma didn't know what to say. She just stood there holding her apron, unsure if she should speak or stay silent. Blake turned and walked to the counter. Everyone's eyes followed him, expecting him to demand compensation, to unleash the fury they all knew was coming. Instead, he asked softly, "Can I have a towel, please?" The barista blinked, unsure she heard right. "A towel?" He nodded. "I'll take care of it." And just like that, Blake Turner, the man whose name sent shivers through boardrooms, knelt down on the cafe floor, wiping the spilled coffee himself. The cafe went absolutely still. You could hear the clinking of teaspoons from across the room. Emma's lips parted in disbelief. You don't have to—" But Blake only said, "Accidents happen." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a lifetime. He returned to his seat, laid the towel aside, and looked up at Emma. Really looked at her this time. Her eyes were tired, her face pale, her hands still trembling. And in that trembling, he saw something familiar. Something he hadn't seen in years. "My daughter," he began softly, his gaze distant, "was your age when she started working her first job. A little coffee shop near her campus. She used to come home every night exhausted but smiling. She said serving people made her feel human, like she mattered." His voice cracked, barely noticeable, but enough for Emma to hear it. "She used to tell me stories," he continued, a small smile ghosting across his face. "About kind customers, rude ones, and how sometimes people treated her like she was invisible." He paused. "She was studying to be a journalist. Said she wanted to tell people's stories, the ones nobody cared to notice." Emma swallowed hard. She could feel every word sink into her chest like a weight. happened to her?" she asked quietly. Blake looked down at his hands. His knuckles turned white. The cafe seemed to hold its breath again. Finally, he said, "A car accident. 3 years ago." The room went completely still. Even the rain outside had become a faint whisper. He leaned back slightly, his voice trembling with restraint. "She was driving home late after a shift. Fell asleep at the wheel. I was supposed to pick her up that night. But I stayed at work." His eyes glistened now, but he didn't blink them away. "When you spilled that coffee, when your hands shook like that, I saw her again." For the first time in years, no one spoke. The cafe that had been buzzing with tension now felt like a sacred space, quiet, reverent, fragile. Emma's throat ached. She wanted to say something, anything, but all she could manage was a trembling whisper. I'm so sorry, sir," Blake smiled faintly, a tired, genuine smile that softened every line on his face. "Don't be. You reminded me that people make mistakes, and sometimes that's what makes them human." He reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp bill and placed it on the table, more than enough to cover the coffee, the mess, and perhaps a week of Emma's pay. "Take this," he said gently, "and take care of your mother. I overheard you talking to the barista earlier." Emma's eyes widened. "How? I've lost someone I loved," he said simply. "You shouldn't have to lose yours." The manager, standing nearby, was speechless. Blake turned to him and added, "Give her a few days off. Paid. Consider it a request." The man nodded instantly, his usual arrogance stripped away, and then something incredible happened. One by one, the customers began to clap. Quietly at first, then louder, the sound of palms meeting echoing through the cafe. Some smiled through tears. Others bowed their heads in quiet awe. It wasn't applause for a spectacle. It was for humanity, for empathy, for the rare moment they had all just witnessed. Emma stood frozen, tears streaming freely now. She whispered, barely audible, "Thank you." "Thank you so much." Blake didn't respond. He just gave a small nod, placed his now empty cup on the table, and rose to his feet. Outside, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. The gray morning had softened into a pale gold, light filtering through the clouds. As he stepped through the door, his silhouette framed against the gentle rain, he paused, looking back once more. Their eyes met. For the first time, Emma didn't see a man of power or pride. She saw a father, quietly carrying the weight of love and loss. And as the door closed behind him, the cafe seemed to breathe again. Emma stood there, her heart full, not of fear, but of something else entirely, because that morning, she realized something she'd never forget, that true strength doesn't come from control. It comes from compassion. The rain outside fades, the lights dim, and the screen slowly fades to black.